sure that you're prepared. Then you need to identify that what was really the problem. You need to identify it that okay, this was the first responder, and I will ask him the few questions, and he is like, you need to identify the first responder first, remember. Secondly, like what exactly the problem was, like whether that was a malware, whether that was a trojan, or that was an inside threat. Inside threat, like that person can be a that person could be that person who is basically involved in the crime, in the cyber crime. So you need to identify that. Then you need to go for the containment. You need to contain, like you need to just move everything apart. You know, go for the isolation, segmentation, that remove everything, and just make sure that the like, remember we have talked about out of band communication. So remember, like that's the thing, like you don't need to expose yourself when you have detected any incident. Then we have to ask few of the question in addition, like we have to ask question like what happened, what was the purpose, how this happened, how we can stop them, and how, what, like who was, like whenever there is an incident or whenever there's a anything like in this world, like the general point of view, like whenever there's any accident or robbery or any disaster or anything man-made, we are just talking about man-made. So that's, there's a purpose for that, like there's like who is the most beneficial after that. So we need to ask, these are the most important question, like okay, this happened, like there was a competition or there was some grievances of our employees, mostly our employees, like what happened in a real world, that the employees are sitting and they just think like at the time of appraisal, like that's the most common part of our year where we just get the appraisals. So sometime what happened, employees have a lot of grievances, like the manager like told them that okay, you will have a 20% pay rise, and basically after in the December or January time, so that the pay rise was only 5%. So and there are a lot of grievances, so that person can become the inside threat. That's true, like that's normally in our cybersecurity that does happen, that person become the inside threat, and he can affect the system. So you need to ask these questions, then we can go for the recovery phase. That means that we are going towards our disaster recovery planning, DR plan. We can go for our business continuity planning, that how we can continue the business, and if that disaster was a huge disaster, so you need to make sure that you have a hot site and you can just move there. So recovery plans, and they are already pre-planned, like playbooks are there for the planning as well. We do create them, so you can just see the steps, like the final step, like you need to go for the recovery planning. Then finally lesson learned, or you can say knowledge base, and that's the, like what you have learned from this, like every day guys we are learning something, we learn something, and that's a lesson learned. Like even like if I do a mistake, never ever in your IT world, guys, remember, this is one of the things that I've learned in my last 15 years. Never think that you know everything. Please never ever think that you know everything. Nobody knows nothing. So the most important thing is you're always learning. Like myself, I am learning these labs now because I'm not sure about the lab, so I need to learn. There are few, like there are things that I will go through in coding dojo, uh, so I will learn something new. So learning process is always there, like it's not like that learning that you will stop learning. So learning phase is there. Same goes for our IT world as well. For incident life cycle, the learning would be there. So preparation, identification, containment, interdiction, and recovery lesson learned. Second was, it is important to publish all security alerts to all members of staff. No, obviously false. Like you cannot, like there was a security issue and there was an incident. So you will not tell everyone, a not technical person, sales guy, hey, we have a incident. Hey, we have a breach of security. No, you will just inform, you alert like few of the important persons of the security, and you will just tell them you are providing security consultancy to assist a company with improving incident response procedure. the business manager wants to know why an out of band mechanism or responder is necessary. Like you need to tell them, why do you say the response team needs a secure channel to communicate over without alert and threat actors? There may be an available issue with the main communication network if there's a obviously, like already we have talked about the communication, like if there is an incident, if that does happen, so you are not sure like still the attacker is there in your system or not. So normally we use WhatsApp calls, Facebook or calls, or you can use or FaceTime, or you can use some any other calls. So like that should be not the part of the network, that should be part of your cellular network that you normally use. Now, which attack framework provide descriptions of the specific TTP? So we already gone through, this is a new framework, that is MITR attack. So this is a new one which is following exactly the TTP. There's a diamond as well. Yesterday we have talked about. Those are the new frameworks. We like guys never get confused in framework as well. We have a lot of frameworks. I myself, I've gone through the ITIL. That's a framework. That's a library. I have gone through the COBAT. That's a framework. ISOs have the framework. We have a lot of other frameworks in our IT world. Like every day, like there will be a new Cyborg is there. So that's a new framework. CompTIA have their own framework. Cisco have their own framework. So framework means like that's the structure that we create and we implement our security infrastructure as per that framework. When we talk about IT service management, if you guys have heard about, so when you are deploying any application, so there's a framework that we need to follow, that how we will create a change board, how you will respond to the change board, how the help desk will work, how the service management should be working, how the communication channels should be there, like when you're working with the stakeholder, who can be working in a recruitment process. So there is a process like when you deploy any IT, any application, as far as the IT is concerned. So ITIL, I normally like we work as we deploy that framework, and that's an hands-on, like you just need to should make sure that the ITIL framework is being followed in our software houses. Okay, your consultancy individual a training segment, which type of incident response access will best represent a practical incident handling scenario? A simulation exercise create an actual intrusion scenario with a red team. Red team, we have different type of teams, purple, red, blue teams performing the intrusion, and a blue team attempt to identify the content. So that's true, like the red team will perform the intrusion and the blue team will attempt to identify it. So that's the things that we should remember. Like we have different type of team, like when you're going for a pen testing, like there are teams like you can just say that exactly, we don't term that like they like physically you will not find like 20 people like 5 teams, like that's a company budget. So normally like two guys are working on it, like two guys are working on each team and they are working together. So that's a teamwork. That's a red team, purple team, blue team that we do have. The first responder is whoever first respond an incident to the CIR team. No, that's not the first responder. They don't inform the CIR team. Like the CIR team will tell you that who was there. It is that the CIR team will come and tell that, okay, that was who they were and who was a person. So the first responder is not exactly reporting to the CIR team. CIR team will come and check like who was the first responder. So the question is opposite basically. Remember, like you are the person, you are working for the CIR team. So you will SOC team. Yes, again, Ibrahim. So I told you guys, like we in our operations department, SOC is our security operations center. So over there we have a CIR team. Like there's a person sitting over there. In the real world, we don't divide a lot, but that's a department. They will come. They will, when they start their interrogation, so they will come and they will just ask them, there are the first responder. Yes, there are the first responder. Yes, there are the first responder. Like you just go and there was an incident. You will just go directly and you will just see like, okay, what happened? So CIR team will check the first responder, like who was the first responder. Like there's something happened. Maybe that's not the first responder, like who's responding it. Like there could be something like a log file could be there. That's the first responder for you. Like for example, there's an alert that IP number 192.168.1.10 have a problem, and there's a log file and there was some malicious file downloaded. So over here, we don't have any first responder. So what you will do, you will directly go to that exact cubicle and you will say that, okay, who what happened? Like, did you download any file? So maybe he will say that, no, I didn't download the file. In the lunchtime, somebody have done it. So that's the first responder. Like that could be much automation as well. You need to correlate intrusion detection data with web server log files. Yes. And what component must you deploy to collect the IDS alert in the SIM? So you need to deploy a sensor to send a network packet captures. We have talked about these sensors, like there are the trap commands, SNMP, that we can use in our network just to make sure like everything, and the protocol that it follows is basically NetFlow. So like you can use the NetFlow one in Cisco. So that's like it's moving towards to check. Like yesterday, PRTG, guys, remember guys? So like that's the sensors that we normally use. Which software tool is appropriate for forwarding Windows event logs to the system compatible tool? So NXLog is designed as a multi-platform logging system. So this is like even few of the things like I'm like that would be new to me as well. Like, but you need to remember these questions like to set up in the examinations for the belt exams and for your computer security plus if you're planning to give. So that's the NXLog that's designed for that. A technician is seeing a high volume of 403 forbidden errors. So we have two type of errors. Remember yesterday we have talked about that's a 500 and 400. So what type of a network appliance or a server produces these logs? So 403 forbidden is an HTTP status code. So most likely a web server. Another possibility is a web proxy or a gateway. So that's the proxy, that's the error from the server side. That's the web server. So 500 is like, remember that was was for the client side. The other was for the server side. An admin would for evidence would for an evidence of a suspicious MTA message transfer agent on SMTP server. You might inspect an SMTP log or internet header metadata of an email. Yes, over here, remember guys, like the MTAs, like we have two type of passwords. One is MTA, one is MUA. And SMTP, can anyone tell me what is the difference between SMTP and POP? Anyone? Ibrahim, Adnan, Salah, Shekha, Abdullah. Abdullah, you're silent today. Ruba, Elf. Anyone? What is the difference between SMTP and POP? Yeah, SMTP is basically a port number. That's port number 25 that we use just for our SMTP exchange. And normally POP mail. Yes, mails. Just a quick, very quick, I don't want to put a lot of time over here, guys, but just a quick understanding. Like, for example, this is your SMTP server. This is your PC. This is Adnan's PC. This is Abdullah's PC. And they want to talk to each other. Okay, this is Adnan. Adnan wants to drop an email to, for example, Abdullah. So over here, Adnan drop an email. He writes an email over here. This is the email he just dropped. He just forward that email. That email would directly go towards SMTP server. This is SMTP server of what domain? Adnan domain is, for example, adnan@xyz.com. This is Adnan's SMTP server. This will go over here. Abdullah's domain is at abc.com. This is Abdullah's SMTP. So over here, this email will go over here to the SMTP server, and over here, when this email will be received in this exchange server of SMTP xyz.com, so SMTP will always be used as a relay. It will be as a relay. It will forward this message to SMTP only, to smtpabc.com. This is the exchange to this one. So Adnan's email is over here for Abdullah. Now it's saved over here through using SMTP. Now Abdullah wants to fetch his email. He wants to say that, okay, I want to fetch your email. So Abdullah will use another protocol that is known as POP. POP3, like that's a post office protocol that has been used. Like there is one more protocol nowadays. You guys must have gone through this IMAPs. So now this is known as mailbox. This email of Abdullah's, Adnan's email would be in Abdullah's mailbox. That is known as a mailbox. If you guys have gone through Office 365, so that's mailbox of Abdullah. Abdullah will now fetch that email using this protocol. So that was a quick understanding like how it works. So clear, guys, everyone? That was very quick. Any question? Clear? Ibrahim? Okay, perfect. So that is like how you fetch the email. Fetching is POP, server to server, SMTP. So not like a logic. A lot of don't get raise your hand, everyone. Okay, Derek is saying raise your hand, everyone, please. So that's it. You are supporting a SIM deployment at a customer's location. The customer wants to know whether flow records can be injected. What type of a data source is a flow record? So flow records are generated by the net flow. Remember, like that's against for the network checking of the network, or IP flow information export probes. A flow record is a data that match is flow records, which is particularly combination of keys. So IP endpoint protocol. So you can just go through these are this was just a definition. Okay, what low-level networking feature will facilitate a segmentation-based approach to contain the intrusion event. So network segmentation is primarily achieved by the virtual LANs. Remember, they are received by the virtual LANs very commonly. A VLAN can be isolated from the rest of the network. So that's yesterday I've gone through about VLANs. The best practice of any of the VLAN, guys, remember, is that it's very good to reduce broadcast. It's very good to reduce the broadcast, to help in the security and to manage. So like if the HR department, yesterday example, guys who were there, HR department cannot talk to the sales department in anyhow. So sales department people will talk to each other, but they cannot talk. If they want to talk, HR and the sales, if they want to talk, so they required a router for that. So you can just set up a route, a static route that you can just provide, or dynamic routing protocol you can use. So that's a nice, easiest practice. Okay, one more question. Sorry, guys, I will not ask a lot like the question. Okay, what is the difference between VLAN and subnet? Anyone? Come on, smart guys. Come on, my smart class. Very simple question of network. What is this is a question that you will get in the interview. So when I like we take interview, so that's a question. Anyone? What is only one line? Like, don't explain me like, okay, subnetting is this. Okay, VLAN for broadcast domain, subnet for organization. We know VLAN cannot reach each other. Yes, subnet cannot also reach each other. You have a different subnet. 192.168.1.0 cannot talk to 192.168.2.0. So that's a different subnet. They cannot talk to each other. That's an interview question. Who will clear this question? You're sitting in an interview. Anyone? God. Okay, no worries. We will not take a lot of time of yours. So what is the real difference, guys? Just a single liner is that VLAN work on layer 2 and subnetting work on layer 3. You create VLAN on switch and you create subnetting on your router. Otherwise, they both are doing the segmentation. That's it. Like they both are doing the segmentation. You can segment your network using subnets, or you can use your VLANs to segment your network. So that was just a quick one. Just write it down somewhere. Okay, what configuration change could you make to prevent misuse of developers account? So disable the account. So one of the coolest thing that we can just do, disable the accounts. You don't need to isolate, monitor, delete account, disable the account. Like if it's required, you can use it afterward. VLAN need trunk subnet data route. Yes, VLAN need a trunk. We like the trunking is like there are two type of options that we can have. VLAN, that's again another topic. So we have a trunk link and we have an access link. Subnet, you need a router on a stick. Normally, we don't use a lot of router on a stick, guys, because your productivity of your router sometimes gets down. So that's sometimes we use router on a stick, but not a lot, because like logically you can create 10 networks. In actual physically there were only two, so you can just understand like your router can be your router can be around. But that was really nice, Adnan, good job. So today, Adnan, we will just talk about routing protocols, and whoever wants to join the class, they can join our little 20-minute session. Okay, anyways, back to the topic. Following a loss of a critical IP exfiltrated from local network to public cloud storage, you decide to implement a type of outboard filtering system. Which technology is most suitable for implementing a filter? So this task is suited to data loss prevention. You can block transfer of the tag content over unauthorized channel. So that is the one so that you can use. Okay, a threat actor gained access to remote network over VPN. Okay, later you discover footage of the user of the hacked account being covertly filmed while typing their password. What type of endpoint security solution you might have to prevent this breach? So mobile MDM suite can prevent the use of a camera function on a smartphone. We have talked about the MDM functionality. You can you can block the cameras. You can block any of the things what you like the microphone, pictures, download, uploads, whatever you want to do. You can just work on your MDM is really handy in our security point of view. SOAR is intended to provide a wholly automated incident response solution. So that's false. Like that's not only solution, like that's just for the reporting purpose. Which of the UTM is like you can say UTMs are more important. Which of the answers listed below refer to the deprecated TLS based method of securing SMTP? So SMTPS, like obviously, like you can just put certificate whenever you put a certificate in your servers, so that will always convert it into S. That's a trick to remember. Which of the following answers refer to the secure implementation of protocol used for synchronizing clock over a computer network? So that is the NTP. Like if you have guys have heard about NTP servers, that is a network time protocol. Now normally, if like for example I am working in other region, Franklin is working in some other region, Derek is working in some other region, you guys are in, so just so like everyone are in a different region. So if because of the time management, like what the IT folks do, they basically create a time server. So everybody would be working on Saudi time, for example. So everyone is aligned on Saudi time. We can have a stream, one stream, like we have Satrum, like one Satrum, two. There are options in our NTP servers. Okay, what are the characteristics feature of a secure version of IAMP? That's the TLS. That's the use for the TLS purpose you can use. And IAMP, again, that's a newer version of POP. Which of the answer listed refer to the POP3 encrypted communication? TCP port 995, you need to learn these ports, like port number 25, 110, 443, port number 80, and port number 3389, one of the like 23, 22, 21. Like these ports, like you need to remember, like the port number 10 and 5. Which of the following protocol use a securing HTTP connection? Always remember when we talk about HTTP. So when you put S over there, so that means your web server is having certificates. A secure version of HTTP protocol offering a traffic encryption is known as HTTPS. Again, whenever you put S, like obviously over SSL, over TLS, we don't use these words. HTTPS is like port number 443 is HTTPS. Which version of SNMP protocol offers authentication based on community strings sent in an unencrypted form? So version 1 was unencrypted, version 2 is there. So kindly drop your hand so like everyone can drop their hand. Okay, so one of the three existing version of the SNMP version 1, 2 offer authentication based communication strings set in an unencrypted form. SNMP version 3 provides encryption. Yes, very important, authentication, hashing mechanism, everything. So like version 3 is like obviously much better. PRTG and SolarWinds, they are using this one, the version 3. FTPS is an extension to the Secure Shell Protocol, SSH, and runs by the default on the port number 22. No, basically SFTPS is FTPS, and there's a difference between SFTPS and FTPS. So SFTPS is basically, this is like the implicit, like there are two type of option in FTPS. Like we have implicit transfer and explicit transfer. If you guys are interested, you can just go through FileZilla. Yesterday I've just gone through to you. A network protocol for secure file transfer over SSH is SFTP. Over here now you can see this one is SFTP is SSH, FTPS is not, that's implicit and explicit. So that's the answer, the same answer like up and down. Okay, secure file transfer protocol is an extension of FTP that adds support for transport layer security and secure SSL cryptography protocol. So not really. Which of the following protocol allows for a secure file transfer? SFTP. LDAP is used for your directory purpose. Yes, that's the LDAP is a protocol that is used in your Active Directories normally. Very commonly, when you create something in your Active Directory, we are using LDAP S for to secure our directory protocol. Like whenever you're connecting with your Active Directory accounts. Which protocol enables secure real-time delivery or audio or video over IP network? So that's the RTP. That is like, if we over here, the point over here is that secure. We are not talking about the real-time protocol only, we are talking about the secure one. So SRTP is the secure one, like just like a video traffic, audio traffic that we are using. Okay, which of the protocol listed below was designed as a secure replacement of Telnet? That's a baby question. So baby question is like SSH port number, like Telnet was always there for the plain text, and SSH was always there for the encrypted cryptographic tunnel that we create. Which of the following answer refers to the cryptographic network protocol for securing data communication, remote command line login, remote command execution, or other secure network services? So SSH is like the best thing. Like if you guys have heard about PuTTY, PUTTY, you can download, it's free. You can generate your own keys as well, pair keys over there. PuTTYGen, I will just like, maybe if I have time like today I can just show you a suite of security extensions for internet service that translates from the domain names into IP address is DNS security. Normally in DNS server world we normally use this. Very important, very handy to make our DNS secure. So guys, any question, anyone? Everyone good? Clear. That was quite in detail, just because of one reason, that you should be clear all the time about the questions, and the concept should always be clear. So now let's get started with our new chapter. That's our, not a new chapter, that's a daily lesson. that we will be going through. That will be digital forensics and documentation. Mostly you guys have done the lab for this. So what is forensics? Like normally, like if we just talk about not about cybersecurity in everywhere, if there was any accident, of there was any robbery, or if there was any murder, for example, god forbid there was a murder, like normally you see the police guys, they will just put some yellow stripes all around that specific incident. Okay, there was a huge robbery, or there was a huge, or there was a murder. So that body of that dead body would be removed, and there will be a chalk sign all around that dead body, and there will be yellow strips all around that incident. So what we call that we secured that incident point, that is secure now. So everybody will, like whoever is the detective, he will just come over there in that specific region. He will start deducting things like, okay, what time this guy was sitting and what time, Sherlock Holmes will start, like there was the investigation process will start. People will ask the questions, and that is our normal detective. Same goes for our in our digital work. So we basically, digital forensic is collection of the evidence that we normally do. uh, there was a breach. First, in our scenario of our network, first we prepare ourselves that nothing could happen. Like we buy firewalls, we buy proxies, we buy load balancers, we buy gateways, we buy email gateways, we buy a lot of other appliances. Then we install and like the endpoints, we enable lot of like defense and depth like we normally do. So then we also create disaster recovery plan, that okay, DR plans are there, business continuity plans are there, BCPs are there. So if something happened, now we are done, we have done all these phases. Now we are here, that is done. Now there was a breach and it has crossed everything. Now we have also recovered from disaster. Now we need to make sure like this would not happen again, and what was the real cause, and who have done that. So now you start investigating it. So this process, like that is the collection of evidence, like whatever you get, so that's the evidence. So explain the aspect of digital forensics, evidence and accusation. So key aspects of digital forensics are evidence, documentation, and admissibility. So evidence is like whatever you get, like that's the thing that I get. Like this guy was at the lunchtime, he was not on his seat, and maybe in the lunchtime he went to the lobby. In my PC, I saw like there was a lady. There was a receptionist. She saw that yes, I'm the evidence to that guy. That yes, I'm the eyewitness. That guy was not there in the lunchtime in our lobby. He was there sitting in his cubicle. So at that was the same time the attack has been performed, like in the lunchtime, like 1 p.m. So that's the evidence. Documentation, you need to make sure like you're documenting each and everything, log files. You cannot blame anyone. You need to make sure that you have a right document to when you create an evidence. So that should be not like, you're just talking. So that's not a good thing. Like you need to document each and everything that could be used. Autopsy is one of the good software that we normally use. Adaptability, you need to adapt all of those things that are made while that incident have been done. Legal holds, like obviously, like this is why we are doing this, like to drag that person, to drag the organization or someone to court. That's the reason. This is like this evidence, like whatever you are finding, that's not for your own purpose. 90%, that's a chain of custody. Like the chain of custody, like you just go for the investigation, you get some evidence, you put on a timeline. After that timeline, you just collect each and everything, and after that you put them in a chain of custody, and then you just show them in the courtroom, and you ask for the justice. So that is the chain of custody actually that we normally use. That's the like positioning each and everything. Okay, what is the report? That is a digital forensics report. Analysis must be performed without bias. Obviously, like if your friend is working or if somebody is working, so you cannot say You cannot like be tilted on one side that okay, this guy, I don't think so that this guy looks so good and he's talking so like in a good manner. I don't think so that this guy is involved. So don't, like when we go for the evidence collection, so you even don't give some questions, like when you ask questions, you don't give the leading questions like, okay, at 1 p.m. what you were doing. You don't need to ask this question like this at 1 p.m. what you were doing. You need to ask the question like, okay, okay, what, where were you at the lunchtime? So you don't need to tell the exact times. So that's the leading question. So you will ask the question like, don't give a lead. So obviously don't go for a bias, like don't be get tilted on one of the person. Analysis method must be repeated by the third party with access to the same evidence. So 90% guys, I will say 90%, we have a third party who is performing this task. Like maybe if you guys have been hired for the third party forensics, so they will come to your organization, they will sit and they will do each and everything like autopsy, like they will just work. I have done the certification autopsy, not for the Linux one, actually the real autopsy that you need to buy. So that's an 8-hour course and certification. In the autopsy, the real autopsy, what happened, we just have an, we known as ingest. We just ingest a image, the whole image, and over here we have timeline that we just set the timeline in autopsy. We set a timeline. And why we set a timeline? Just like at what time it happened, and we collect that timeline using the hashes, shards. You can say hashes. So the hash algorithm are automatically run in autopsy, but a lot of detail and lot of, because you can just imagine like in this Windows I'm using, how many like they like it's like how many files and folders are there in my laptop. So what emails I've been doing, each and everything would be there in that autopsy software. Everything would be collected using that image. Anyways, that's a good software. Ideally, evidence must not be changed or manipulated. So if the third party is involved in something, so they can change the evidence as well, so they can manipulate this does happen. Like if you talk about the corruption, yesterday we have a question like corruption, like if you are corrupt, if somebody is like they have asked for the money that okay, let's like we will pay you this amount of money, can you do us a favor, so like you can just buy someone. So e-discovery, discovery means like you discover something. E means like we are talking about electronic world. So electronically stored information, ESI. What is that? That's entitled a search of a whole drive, including both allocated, unallocated sectors for incidents. So whenever you put your image in autopsy, I will just put the example of autopsy because I've used it. So that will be directly going towards the putting like deducting each and everything. Like you cannot say that okay, that's like left. No, nothing is left. Everything is there and you need to measure. Identify and deduplicate files and metadata. We have talked about metadata yesterday. There's data of data that's known as metadata. So you need to make sure like what path that you have been there. So many files on computer systems are strained and installed files or copies of the same file. E-discovery filters these types of files, reducing the volume of a data that must be analyzed. So like again, deduplication, like there's a, like whenever the attacker is leaving, so he attacked first, he attacked the metadata that you cannot detect his footprints. Second, he just destroy the deduplicate, like he may start to make a duplication of each and everything. So you get confused. So that's the two things that you need to make sure like they are been there. So the again, like you don't have to do a lot over here. That autopsy you need to just check. Search allow investigators to allow to locate file of interest to the case, as well as a keyword search software might support semantic search. We have a lot of search, like we have a search panel at the time base, like okay, at 1 p.m. on 2020 there was an email that was sent, so that will be there. So everything would be there. So search is important. Tags are there, like whatever you apply the standardized keywords or labels to files and matter to have the organized evidence. So let me just show you like maybe See, I like 90% you guys have must have seen this. Ah, sorry. Dude, that was. Okay, this is the autopsy. Like, if you guys have seen, this is like just to show you, like maybe if you can see the tags how they work. So if you see over here, guys, this is the data source. Like you can just find. Look at these. Log calls are there, contacts are there, devices there, keywords are there. In the end, you will find tags. Like whatever you are tagging in the last part, like you will just see. Maybe like that's not visible to you, but let's click this. Ah, yeah. So this is how, like this is like the real autopsy like we normally use. That's buy, like that's you need to buy it. So extracted content are there over here. You will find the messages, recent documents, what were they. You just click them, you will find this is the path, that of the data, date, time, each and everything. And over here you will find like the hash algorithms. Like you will run the hash algorithms again. You can just check the meta string. It's like over here phone numbers, IP address, emails, 549 emails. Over here we have tags. These are the tags. This is the metadata that we normally use. So that's how really the autopsy looks like, like if you buy it. So, but yes, like that, that's also, Ibrahim, a software that we normally use. But as per my own experience, because I've never used it practically, so this is I've used it. So that's why the difference between autopsy and they're doing the same job, guys. I mean, they're doing the same job. Their job is to verify the evidence, to collect, and the purpose is for the chain of custody. You collect each and everything, put them in your folders, and use them in the courtroom. The job is similar. That's nothing. That's just a software. Like if you just see over here, let me just show you. These are the companies like who are doing this. Like that's just the same case. So security at all point evidence must be shown to have store oops, stored and transmitted and analyzed without tampering. So disclosure, an important part of a trial procedure is that the same evidence may be available to both uh, plaintiff and defendant. So much tough word. So it's like that's a disclosure, like you don't need to do it. So this is autopsy. This is a Belcut soft and forensic. Like you can see, like these are just for the forensic. NCASE is also used for forensic. Like you can search on Google, guys, as well. So like just a difference between autopsy and forensic and NCASE you'll find. But myself, my own hands-on experience is on autopsy. Look, because like that's a good one for me at least. We have a timeline in autopsy, very important. Like let me just show you again. Discard this. Autopsy timeline. Timeline. It will tell you each and everything. And this is very nicely done over here. If you see, this is how the timeline looks like. This is the timeline. It will tell you a lot, guys. Like you can see this. It will tell you like what time like you were like 99 till 2012, at what timeline like you were doing each and everything, what year. So we can reduce the timeline, we can increase the timeline. Very handy software, as at least for me. So if you guys are interested, like you can go to some other software as well. Like there's no hard and fast rule, but that's the one software. So timelines are there. Like you can set up the timeline as per the UTC, coordinated universal time. The benchmark time is coordinated universal time, which is essentially the time at the Greenwich Meridian. NTP, we can, as I told you, we can use the NTP server for this. So servers are commonly used. Server like for the geographical dispersion, like you can use a server. And we have a Spectrum 1, Spectrum 2. These are the two options that we normally use in our servers. You can use the server for this. Event logs and network traffic, what it is. So retrospective network analysis, very important term. Retrospective, like in our Cisco world, we normally use Cisco world, we use retrospective term very commonly. Why? Because you're checking again and again of the packet, like if something changed, of the header, actually the TCP header. So that's the analysis that we normally do. What is that? RNS solution provides a means to record network events at either a packet header or payload. So you're checking just the targeting again and again the payload and packet header. Always. 90% you guys are familiar with the TCP header. TCP header is having first the source port number, then the destination port number. It is having the acknowledgement. It is having the sequence number. It is having a payload as well, like that's a data, like where it is saved. So if the data is like, if you have a high window sizing, so there's something known as a padding. You can increase the padding over there. Where so this is considered as a payload. Like if you convert this one, if you directly go to the IP, it will be considered as a trailer, like at the time of encapsulation. Anyways, that's a network topic. So payloads are where your data is there. So that's considered as a payload. Security information event management. So we have already talked about yesterday about like how you can just use SIM for your network, how you can use SOAR, how these are being used in our real world as well, and what is the purpose, that to make sure the log files are maintained, trending is there, forecasting is there, how much threads that you are receiving. So that's the purpose of SIM. Original log versus admissible, in most cases protected, secure it always. So you need to make sure like if there is any original log or it's been changed, so that's the difference, like that you need to find. Strategic intelligence and counter intelligence. So there are two type of companies: those have been hacked and those who don't know they have been hacked. Okay. Former CEO John Chambers. I was working on like in 2014. Yeah, John Chamber, 2014, 2015. John Chamber was the CEO of Cisco Systems. After that, right now it's Chuck Robin. Chuck Robin is the CEO of Cisco Systems. So John Chamber was a nice person. Like I've never talked to him, but obviously I was on a very least position. So he's a CEO. So whatever he's saying like nice. Like there are two type of companies: those have been hacked or who don't know that they have been hacked. So don't be a company at least like who don't know that you're hacked. So at least should know like you are being hacked. So at least that's the key point. There are two approaches, guys. One is proactive, one is reactive. So always be a good person who always be proactive rather than reactive. Counterintelligence is the identification and analysis of the specific adversary tactics, techniques, and procedure. TTPs provide information about how to configure and audit active logging systems so that they are most likely to capture evidence and attempt a successful intrusion. So counterintelligence, like always, that you take counterintelligence of like you need to follow the TTP procedures, like what they are, like how the attack can perform, how the attacker behave, how the pivot is working, how they get into the organization, how the macros work, how the malware work, how the Trojan. So you need to be aware of the techniques, like how the reconnaissance is working. So you need to be counterintelligence, like you need to be, if this happened, like you need to be proactive to do the counterintelligence at that time. Strategic intelligence, that's data and research that has been analyzed to produce actionable insights. That's like the planning that you need to do. These insights are used to inform risk management and security control provisioning to build mature cybersecurity capabilities. So these are the folks like your CISOs and your CTOs and the person who are the top notch people, like who are there. So they basically create a strategy, intelligence planning, and they say that yes, okay, let's do a planning and how we can avoid any of the breach of security. And if we have a breach of security, so we should have a third party who will be detecting that forensics. Like again, I told you, like forensic evidence is 90% done by some third parties, because that's very time consuming. Like if for example Saad is hired. Saad is hired for the forensic, and he's working as a security guy. Ibrahim is also a security guy. Like they both are working as system analyst. So if I say that, okay, now start working on this. So it is very time consuming because you're checking every file, you're checking each and everything. It's very time consuming. At least 3 or 4 people are working on a single project. So that's why company basically hired a third party because they want their, again, remember guys, BCP. BCP is business continuity plan. So your prime focus as an engineer, as a network guy, as an administrator guy, as a cybersecurity guy, as an analyst, like whatever you call yourself, that the business should be running. Like if one of the employee is not getting internet access, so that's your job. If one of the employee is doing something wrong, so that's your job. If the server is not working, that's your job. If your data centers are not working, it's your job. If the protocols are not good, that's your job. So business is important. So that's why normally we hired 90% that we normally hired a third party, that we normally pay them, that okay, you can do the forensic. You can just give a small area in your organization that okay, you can sit over there and you can start working on that project. That's considered as a project. Like okay, and the timeline you decide for that forensic is like okay, for 3 months, like that's like we will pay you for 3 months, or that project cost, again total lump sum cost that you just put, that okay, like $10,000 or $15,000, like that's like they're highly expensive people. So that's your job, and we need evidence such that, because like why we are doing this, guys, remember, just to avoid courtroom. For example, somebody have fined you, somebody have sue you, your organization, that these xyz.com people are basically are corrupt, because of their, like because of them, like we are not sure about them, that maybe they are doing that by themselves, like they are taking our data. So somebody have sue you, so you need to avoid the courtroom. So that's why you collect all this evidence chain of custody against like someone who have really done that. So you will show to them that okay, that was not our company, that was a person who was doing this, now he is not available, we have sacked him, you can hire a case against him. So that's a real procedure in our real life, in our real network, that we normally work. Guys, any questions? Sorry, I'm not asking you guys, I'm talking too much. Any question, anyone? Clear. Bashir, Ibrahim have told, Shika, yes, everyone just put why, clear, whatever you like. Quickly, yes, Ruba, okay, Sumaya, perfect, Nora, oh, more guys, everyone. Okay, Sami, Rawan, Talal, Rima, perfect, Elf, perfect, guys, perfect. So everyone is clear. Derek, it's time for break. So directly pop in your private message. It's time for break. Okay, so let's take a break now, guys, for 15 minutes. Then we can continue. Okay, see you in 15 minutes. Volatile data that we do have in our network, and the most volatile data is in the RAM. That's like we already talked about these things, and you guys must be knowing. Then the first is cache, the CPU cache. That's like quite small, like that. It's like the MBs. Then RAM data. Then we have a data that is after RAM. What was that? What was that? Okay, first CPU, then memory, then the RAM, then you can say the physical drives, and then the archive drives. So these are the data that are volatile. So whenever there's any attack or whenever there's something, so we need to make sure that you save your data. So you make sure that you are protecting your data, and you're making sure that the data would be safe and protected. So how to do that? So we have a process, like not a process, you can say from top to bottom, that you need to follow those, like first go for the CPU registers, then go for the persistent data, non-persistent system memory, then go for the storage, check each and everything, log files and HDD or SSDs, like you need to make sure that the SSDs are there, and you get the data. And finally the RAM, oh sorry, finally your USB drives, like that's the, like you make sure that your data is not lost. So first thing is to power off or not to power off, that is the question. So a parody of Hamlet by Shakespeare. So first, remember like the two scenarios sometimes. Like the best scenario is that when when you like for example 190.168.1.10 was system affected. That was a compromise system. So the best practice you can do is that to don't turn it off. Just put the cable, just remove the RJ45 that it's away from your network. Then try to recover as much data as you can on the hard drive, like that the external hard drive you can put. So that's the basic thing. Remember, don't turn it off. Always turn it on and make sure that you get as much data. You can recover as much data as you can so that your whole data is not lost. So obviously there would be a chances that there would be a malware in the data. Yes. So that's why isolations are there. So you need to isolate that laptop away from the network and do in the lab rooms or do in your virtual machine or like wherever like you have created the lab rooms or sandboxing, like you can work on there. So don't turn it off. Now, CPU registers and caches. So make sure like the CPU registers, like the most volatile memory is CPU. So CPU registers, like they're not like a huge memory. Like that's not in gigs. That's in like not more than 10 megs or 20 megs. Like that's not more than that. But you need to make sure that CPU registers are there. Cache memory is also very small, like portion of memory. Again, that's not in gigs. That's just in MBs. Content of not persistent system memory, so that is your basically that's your hard drive, like over here, like that's not persistent, like maybe that could be your ram, because like when you turn off, like you guys are already like graduate, so you must be knowing that when you turn off the computer and when you turn it back, so the RAM memory is lost. So RAM is random access memory, that's not persistent. So like that means like you turn it off. Like in our Cisco world, what we normally do, there is something known as like normally what we do, there's a command that we normally use in our Cisco world. For example, you put a router configuration, like you just enable it and you just put router enable. Now over here in this global mode, in this privilege mode, so there are different commands. Show, for example, show configuration. Yeah, uh, seriously, need to, yeah, show running config. Over here, you will find everything which is in the configuration. So what you need to do, you need to copy, like in routers, switches, firewalls, there's something risk commit, you need to commit the changes. Always remember, guys, because like everything is in the RAM. When you make a, when you basically when you make a change, that's not change at the moment. So you need to copy, you need to put a command like this, copy running config to your real seriously, let's do it. Copy running config to copy running config in Cisco. Anyone don't know the startup config, guys? Like why you all are so silent? Nobody knows these command. Yeah, please help me. Like why you guys are silent? Okay, that is startup. That's start up config. So why we do this, like this thing, like why we do this part? The reason why we are doing this, that's to make sure that your RAM, when your laptop or sorry, when your router, yes, thank you, Adnan. Like you should help me with this like startup config. So when you're to do configuration on routers, yes. So like over here, what we are doing, that's the copy running config. We are copying that to startup. That means, like for example, if your router is turned off and something goes like, you know, it randomly your switch just turn off. So in that scenario, your whole configuration will be gone. So you need to make sure in our network world, in our proxy world, in a firewall world, that you need to go for commit. That's sometime in our normal changes. Yes, so we need to have it safe. Yes, or in a GUI board, like there's something known as commit. Commit, COMMIT. You will find commit changes. Just put a log over there that okay, why you just changed something. So that's changed now. So that's why we normally, it's very important that your persistent or your memory in your RAM is safe and it's not gone. Like whatever your configuration that you have done, it's not like disappear when you turn it off and turn it on again. Data on persistent mass storage devices, partition and file system blocks slack space and free space, so that is always there. System memory caches, we have already talked about, such as swap pages, virtual memory, and hibernation files, like they are also the part. Temporary files cache, such as browser cache, like normally in our in IE, that is Internet Explorer, we have a cache for each and everything. We have a history for each and everything, so that should be secure. User application operating system files and directories, so that you need to make sure that the directories and the application, like whatever there are updates or operating system files, they are like safe and you just get their data. Now, remote logging and monitoring. So monitoring files are those files just like your log files, your event manager, like you will find those files over there. Monitoring purpose that we normally use for the monitoring purpose that we are using those files. Physical configuration and network topologies. So physical configuration, like you physically configure something like that could be your printers as well, or that could be your IP phones as well. So that's the physical configuration, like you put your IP phone in your laptop and you connect it. And network topology. So network topology, like we have two type of topologies in our network world. One is network topology. We have logical and physical topology as well. Like we have bus topology, ring topologies, and we have different topologies. So the network topology, like how many things that you will get, like RJ45 configuration and LAN configuration. Archive media and printed documents should be secure as well, like they are not lost. That means your USB drives, your documents, like physical documents we're talking about, those are lost. HKLM registry only exists in memory, so the content of registry can be analyzed by via memory dump. Digital forensic software. So these are the software, as Ibrahim, like maybe he asked me about NCase. I have, sorry buddy, I've never worked on this one. I've just worked on this one, the SleuthKit. This is like I have worked on. So autopsy was the part. Just like guys, never think like this in your real world, that you can work on every tool. No, you cannot work on every tool. That's totally company based. That's totally organization based. You are right now, you're on a boot camp. When you're done, you just get a job over there. Cisco routers are there and Huawei routers are there. Like you will learn that. You don't know nothing about Juniper's router, but when you will get into the environment, your concepts are important. So your concepts are clear. So when you go in that environment, you will learn Juniper's coding, like how to configure that. You will learn the firewall, like how you can configure pfSense, like if you don't know. So there are so many coding, there are so many software. So like that's quite impossible. I will say that's nearly 99.99% impossible that you can go through, like thousands of softwares are there, you can use them. So the basic understanding that should be there, like what that tool is used for, and the basic features are more or less are similar. So SwiftKit are their forensic tool, like you can just search on the Google, like how they work, WinHex and volatility frameworks, like you can go through these softwares. System memory acquisition, so live acquisition, crash dump, and hibernation files and page files. So what is like how much data that you will get, like the system is running and you didn't turn it off. For example, Linux is running or Ubuntu is running, so that's not turn it off. Like you will get as much as you can, like from your system. That is known as a live acquisition of the computer. Acquirement, basically that means like you're getting that, like you acquire. Acquisition, like you just get everything. Live acquisition is a specialist hardware or a software tool can capture the content of a memory while the host is running. Very important point for this sentence, is very important from here to here. Unfortunately, this type of tool needs to be pre-installed as it require kernel mode driver to dump any data to interest. Some examples are Windows include WinHex, MemoryX, F response, Linux, and in Linux, like we have memory dump, DD, like you just copy volatility framework. So this is like you can install it. Like if something goes wrong, like that's already your data. Like there's something like in a real world, we normally don't do this for specific PCs. In data centers or in our web-based world of web servers, guys, we normally take a snapshot. Anyone knows about snapshot? The VM machines, like you can just take a snapshot. Perfect. Ibrahim, only Ibrahim knows about like these snapshots. Like the rest of the guys don't know. Restore point. Perfect, Adnan. Who else know? Everybody know. Just put Y if you know. If you don't know, I will just put something extra like put. Okay, here also Saad also like perfect. Shikha, like if you know, that's good. So that's just a point in time storage. Normally, when you just create some web server, or if you just create a database, so in a cloud world, that's like very handy now. You just take a snapshot and you turn off the appliance. You just take a snapshot. You're not paying for the snapshot anymore. So your data is safe. Your configuration, your everything is safe. If you want to use that data again, you just take that snapshot, put in that configuration mode. In our Amazon world, we normally do this. Very, very common snapshots are there. So that is been reutilized. So that's like common, like more common now. Crash dumps, like when Windows encounters an unrecoverable kernel error, it can write content of memory to a dump file at C Windows memory dump. So that's a dump file. You need to make sure that you get it. Hibernation files and page files, what are they? A hibernation file is created on a disk in the root folder of the boot volume. When a Windows host is put into sleep state, if it can be recovered, the data can be decompromised and loaded into a software tool for analysis. The page file is not structured in a way that the analysis tools can interrupt, but it is possible to search for string. Yes, this point is very important. At least like, hibernation is fine, but the page files are not readable. So what you need to do, you need to make sure that you get everything from the hibernation page files and you study it. So guys, I told you like that's a deep study like for forensics. Like it's not like that you will do it like this. No, it's a very, very lengthy process. Take months to do it. Disk image acquisition. So that is three device state: live acquisition, static, and static acquisition. Like shutting down the PC, like you can just directly shut it down. You would just put it, like shut it down, or you're pulling the plug. So obviously it totally depends upon like which one you want to do. But as per my own understanding, as per my own experience, acquisition is like much better. Like just take it, put it somewhere, isolation, get something, then you can turn it off. So that will be like more better. Like, but if your whole network is becoming a botnet and there's a big problem, so you can just shut down and start working. Forensic toolkit, and it's the FTK imager. So that's again the toolkit, like you can install advanced forensic format, AFF. What is this? That's an open source advanced forensic format. Provides similar features, like that's the similar features that are be provided from here to here. If no specialist tool is available on Linux, host can use a DD command to make a copy of an input file. So you guys must, like 90% guys, you must be familiar with the DD command. That's a copy command that you're copying your file from one place to the other. DSFLD uses like these command, even I don't know. So version of a DD with the additional forensic for functionality created by DDoS and generating a hash of a source disk data. Okay, SDA. So that's the like extra command line. Like guys, to be honest, when you work for a MNCs, multinationals, you work for someone. So when you go over there, you will learn so many different commands. You need to learn Windows PowerShell. How many knows about the Windows PowerShell?
Yes, I do.
Perfect. You know about, you should know
How
about
are you,
Linux as well.
Muhammad?
How about you? I just called you, Abdullah. Like you were like,
I really had a problem with my, so in my area there is an internet
uh,
problem.
Uh-huh.
and I'm now logging in from my phone, so I'm having difficulty.
Oh.
Yeah, it's just a problem I'm trying to fix.
Okay, so you're logging from your phone using cellular data.
Yes, exactly.
Open the hotspot, connect to your laptop.
I did, but it just keep cutting off, keep kicking me out of
Ah.
Zoom.
Oh, okay, okay. Don't worry. Just use like the important. Like I was just call your name as well. Like I was just thinking, where's Abdullah? You didn't join the session. Your group, like Venomous, like your group name is for tomorrow wheel, and you were not interested.
Yeah,
You
we're gonna
know,
do it now. That's why I'm trying to. Yeah, I'm
no,
trying
no,
to
no, no.
fix the
Adran
internet.
was there. Adran was there. Adran was there, and Adnan, Nora, Haya, like few of the ladies, and Adnan was there, like seven. Okay, don't worry.
When
I will
was
just
this?
I I put a broadcast message to everyone. Adnan, you are the
Oh,
witness.
sorry, my
Remember?
apology. Maybe I didn't see it.
No, no, no worries. It's a
Yeah,
joke. No, no worries. I know like a lot of people know about VLANs and things. I definitely know. So today we will do a session regarding EIGRP, BGPs, and RIP and OSPF. OSPF is a huge topic in CCNP, but I will just give a little teaser like how it works. Okay, in lab, not
during the
right
lab,
now.
right?
Yeah, during your lab, you will be doing lab, but I will just take your 15 minutes
All
all
right.
of all of you, not more than that. Perfect,
We will wait
perfect.
you in Venomous.
Thank you, sir. Okay, not in like I will go in the main room. You need to come to the main room, like the main room.
Okay, okay, okay.
You have
Got
to
it, got
you
it.
have to leave there. Okay, perfect. Okay, so okay, back to the topic. So guys, talk to me, everyone. Like, why you all are like Saad is there, Adnan is there, Ibrahim, like they got like rest of them. Please don't be shy, don't be silent. So please talk to me, whatever you want to, confusions, anything apart from this computer security or boot camp as well. We can just have a quick chats about everything. So disk image acquisition, like we have talked about this now, preservation and integrity of evidence. So now we are preserving our data to put them in a chain of custody. So our evidence is make sure like our evidence is working, and like our evidence is there in our autopsy, for example, and we just put them in arrangement. So you can have a right blockers for that, and data acquisition with the integrity with non-repudiation. So a cryptographic hash of the disk media is made using either the MD5 and SHA. I will not love to find this word MD5. MD5 is not good for hashing anymore. So SHA-256 or SHA-512 is there. So definitely that's a better algorithm now. The output of the function can be described as a checksum. Perfect. A bit-to-bit copy of a media is made using the imaging utility. So when you talk about bit-to-bit, so it's always lengthy process. Guys, you guys must have gone through cryptography. In cryptography, in encryption, we have two type of options. One is known as a block cipher are there. One is known as stream cipher. In stream cipher, it is always working as bit to bit. So and block cipher, it's just a block like it's like around what was the size, 204 bytes something, 2048 bytes something. So that's a block. So whenever you use symmetric encryption, so you send a block cipher. Why we send a block cipher, guys? Like, okay, there's again a live thing in your real world. Whenever you're working for data centers, like you want to transfer a data from here, from this data center, from this DC to this DC using a fiber channel. So what you do for the encryption purpose, you're using symmetric encryption. You know why? Because symmetric block, because like it will be quick to send data from here to there, because that whole network is basically private. So that's why you don't worry about a lot. So the speed is very good, faster. Yes, Nora, faster. It's very faster. But if you talk about stream cipher, we normally use for our normal connection from our here to our web server, because it's bit to bit. So like one and zeros, one zeros, one zeros, one zeros. So every bit will have a conversion of a cipher conversion, so a lot of load. So we normally don't use it. So over here, if we go back to our topic, a bit to bit copy of a media is made using a bridging. So you can just imagine this thing. It will take a lot of time. It's time consuming. Bit to bit copy is a lot of time consuming. So normally it takes a lot of time. There's something known as in our IT world, 90% of you must have heard about the term rendering. Rendering. What is rendering? Anyone? Rendering animations. Remember, guys, anyone? Whenever you are making any animation movie or any cartoon, for example, you're so for every animation, like you have a frameworks. So that's a frame. That frame need to be rendered, and that's a real time consuming process. Apart from this topic, that's really a pain. So you can type the word in the chat. Okay, thanks, Derek. Rendering to everyone. Rendering. That's rendering process. Rendering, like that's maybe I'm missing any spelling mistake. I will just for show you guys over here. Rendering in animation. That's rendering like normally we do. Like if you create a rendering, that's a software. Maya software was very popular. So when you're doing like this, so you render the videos. Like whenever you're rendering something, it takes a lot of time. So this is how it render. Anyways, that's an off topic, but that's known as rendering. So that's a lengthy process. That's again bit to bit. I was just talking about bit to bit. That's a bit to bit, and that takes like that's always time consuming. A second hash is then made of an image which should match the original hash of the media. A copy is made of the reference image, validated again by the checksum. Analysis is performed on the copy. So like you need to perform that analysis like when you're performing it, but that should be on your copy, not on your real file. So acquisition of other data that could be a network. You need to make sure like your network files, your network monitoring files, your cache, artifact. That again, artifacts are anything that is like image, your documents, where everything is considered as artifacts. Data recovery, snapshot. This is I've already talked about snapshot, point in time, and framework. Like you need to make sure your other data should also be secure. It's not about only your cache. It's not only about your RAM. It's not only about your HDDs or SSDs. It's not only about your only data. That the data could be of your network. That data could be of your recovery. That your could be your D drive, or could be your server data. Like if you guys have heard about iSCSI, how many of you heard about iSCSI in Windows world? Anyone knows about iSCSI? iSCSI target and initiator. Perfect. So there's a target and initiator in our iSCSI world. So we need to make sure our target storage. Yes, that's a storage. Initiator, you target something. Like in a real world, we don't basically, this is a server, Windows server. 90% you will find Windows server everywhere. Windows server, this is your server. And the storage that you basically, your Windows server have a storage of like, for example, 200 gig. So you will not use storage for 200 people. You will not use storage for 200 gig. So what you need to do, you just remove this hard drive. You just buy a new hard drives, for example, in a RAID 1110 or whatever RAID you like, and you just put that storage over here. Now you will put a rule over here that is initiator and a target. You will target your storage over here. Like 200 people, if they want to store something in your network, so they will directly come to your server. Server will give a target to this iSCSI. That's iSCSI basically. So that is also important, like to make sure that the storage is set correctly. Like just like a snapshots, storages are there. Digital forensic for cloud, 90% we cannot do forensic cloud at the moment. I'm not sure about the future, but at the moment cloud have an SLA. I'm not like over here it's not written SLA. Whenever you buy something from Amazon or Azure or anywhere, so you just go for an SLA. That is a service level agreement that you basically sign, and they're very smart. So what they do, they say that that's a both responsibility for the customer and for us as well. Like that's a customer responsibility and client and our responsibilities, or you can say vendor responsibility. So they say that okay, if something goes wrong, that's we are not only responsible. You customer, like maybe that would be on your end, there is an issue. So that's an SLA in the real world. That's why still there are some question marks in cloud. So it's like quite difficult to do an forensic in a cloud, because like cloud you need to go and go in Amazon EC2. You will do the forensic. It's a time consuming. Restrictions are there. So bring your own device offsite. Offsite is like quite easy. Like you can just go through offsite, physical offsite. I'm not talking about cloud offsite, physical offsite you can do. But in cloud, we have regional areas that is divided. So in that scenario, it's quite near to, again, as per my own experience, it's difficult process because of the SLA. Chain of custody on demand. Again, the word is very important over here. I will highlight this. Oops, highlight on demand. Like you cannot do it by yourself. That's on demand. You need to ask Amazon, you need to ask Microsoft Azure that can we do this. So that's like the that's an agreement between you and them. So that's why that's quite issue. Jurisdiction and sovereignty. So like region wise, like there could be some issue, like if there's a data is in US, other data is in London, and other data is in Russia. So there will be a difference in every area. And in China, it's like there's a uh, every area have their own governmental laws. So again, that's why I'm saying you like that's cloud. It's quite a challenge. So what are the things that we have gone through? Guideline for digital forensics, like that was one important thing that we have gone through. What is forensic? That is anything that we normally do after the breach. First, we make our system defense, like we improve the defense, and we just say that okay, the defense and depth should be there, and defense is very important. Firewalls are important, proxies are important. But if the breach is successful, the attacker was very smart. So we go for the disaster recovery plan. If the disaster recovery plan is like trigger, is working fine. So you will isolate few of the machines then, and you will start investigation. That is a very lengthy process to do a forensic. It's not that like just a single file that you will just see. Like for example, my own laptop, I'm using Windows 10. So my image of this Windows 10 is huge, like a lot of data is there. So I will just put every data, take the image and put it in the autopsy or NCASE or any of this software like I like. So I will put over there and I will start studying it. So that's a very time consuming process. 90% third party companies are basically working with the forensics. If you are hired for those companies, so you will be very expert. You should be very aware of hashing, about the hash algorithms, about steganography. Steganography is very important over here, and about the malwares, about each and everything. So because like you should know a deep knowledge about the malwares. So forensic is there. Follow the guidelines for the supporting forensic investigation. First, develop and adopt a consistent process for incident responders to handle and preserve forensic data. So there would be someone like that could be a handler. Like in our autopsy accounts, when you buy an autopsy software, you have option for 3 account holders, like they are the handlers. Like that is considered as a handler account. So for example, me, I'm there, Saad is there, Ibrahim is Abdullah, and Nora. Like we have a group of people, just like a breakout rooms that you have, a group of people are there. So they will be start handling each and every that specific autopsy, because you cannot investigate alone. You required a team for this investigation. So that's why we required handlers for that. So and reserve the and preserve the forensic data. You say obviously autopsy by default, it is having the preserve data option. Chain of custody is automatically there. Timeline is automatically there. Tags are there. Tags are very important. So tags are there. Like wherever you think that okay, there is a question mark over here. So you tag the data and you discuss with your team first that okay, I think that this is a problem. So your manager or someone who knows a lot about the malware, so he will just check. Consider the order of volatility and the potential loss of evidence if software, if the host is shut down or powered off. So you need to make sure, we have gone through this a lot now. So you need to make sure that the data is the most volatile data should be should get preserved first, like before it get lost. So you need to make sure that that data is safe, and it's like it's been safe like in autopsy or any software, so that it's not lost. So so that's important, like to remember power off, like that means like you cannot power, there's a live accusations, and like there are some of the like shutdown. So before shutting down, try to get as much as you can. That's the trick over here. Okay, record evidence collection using video and interview witnesses to gather statements. So you need to confirm from your witnesses, like, hello, what happened? What was the issue? So you need to confirm with them. You need to play with them. Again, you need to act like a detective at the moment, Sherlock Holmes. Like you need to be a part of it. So you need to make sure that you don't give any lead questions. You need to show that whoever is a culprit, so you should make sure that you get the handful evidence against that person, then you can just file a case against him. So that's important. Deploy tools such as WinHIX or Autopsy or FTK Imager that can capture and validate evidence from persistent and non-persistent media. So that is like already talked a lot about, like we have different tools that could be WinX, that could be Autopsy, that could be HTK Imagers, and we have different options that we can do. Establish a method of recovering forensic data for CSP that we can do. That is a cloud service provider. CSP is cloud service provider. So like that's again, I'm telling you, I'm not sure, I'm not experienced enough for this part, that cloud, but the SLA, because of the SLA, at least like 2 years back, like I was working for somewhere. So there are issues like in the SLA agreements with, at least with Amazon, there are issues. Document evidence using a chain of custody. So chain of custody would be there in your autopsy, like you can just put preserve each and everything, finally just align them in a chain of custody, like how much evidence, like is it feasible to put in the courtroom or not. So what type of issues, Ibrahim, like over here, because Amazon, when they provide you the storage, so the security is 90% their point, like they say that that's our end. So obviously, if you start investigating in their EC2, so obviously they will start shouting. They will say that, okay, we are 100% sure that our Amazon is secure and there is no breach. There would be a problem at your on-premises appliances. Like there would be, like, for example, there was a breach of security in a database in cloud. For example, you are using a bucket, S3 bucket. Like you guys can search S3 bucket. That's a bucket like we normally use. And there was a storage in that bucket. And that data was retrieved by someone, and that data is being retrieved and is being selling. This is the common thing. It's been selling in the dark web, like people are selling their data, and your whole data is there available. So you will directly go to the Amazon and you will say that, hey, my data has been breached and somebody is selling my data. Who has done that? So Amazon will say that, hey, it's not our problem. There must be someone sitting on your end, because like when you want to access Amazon, you require a console access to Amazon. You require a pair of key. One is known as a private key, one is known as a public key share. That public and private key share keys, pair of keys basically we call. So they normally say that we like that's required to connect to Amazon. So Amazon will say that there should be an issue with at your end. There could be a compromise with your private key or public key. From our end, there's no issue. Like they will always say this, like from our end, because that's a big name. So when you start forensicing, like there are things like, so that over here there's an agreement and they say that, okay, you are allowed to do this. Like again, you need to ask them before like doing anything, because you will run softwares over there. Autopsy will be stored, checking each and everything and checking the data who have done that. So that's quite that's quite a troubling job, because like that's true as well. Like there are inside threats in our organization. So there could be a person in our organization who has just put something in that S3 and get that data. So that is the issue, like in the real world, like we normally get. Clear, Ibrahim? Everyone clear? So like obviously like there that's a big name like Amazon, Microsoft, like Google, obviously, like that's a big name. So obviously they will not say that we are not secure. Common sense, guys. They will not say that we are not secure. There were inside thread in Amazon. There could be there could be inside thread in Amazon, and that guy basically sold your data to someone. They will not say this. They will never like that's the difficult part in cloud that is still there. So be aware of potential forensic evidence as a source of strategic intelligence and counterintelligence. So we need to be make sure that we are prepared for the strategic planning. Is again just a refresher for everyone. That's been done for that's 90% is strategic planning has been done by the CTOs, CIOs, CISOs, and those security guys, cybersecurity team, like they are doing the planning. Counterintelligence, like if something comes up, so you need to follow the TTP procedures, that how to react and act like a attacker, that what best practice that you can follow if something goes wrong. So explain the key aspects of digital forensic documentation, explain key aspect of digital forensic evidence and accusation. Already we have talked a lot about this now. Guys, anyone, any question, guys, related to the topic? Anyone? Guys, everyone, wake up. Anyone clear? All good for me. Thanks, clear. Perfect. So just put clear, thanks, clear, whatever you like. So no thanks. Perfect. Help. Perfect. Shika. Perfect. No, perfect, guys. Anyone else? Thanks, Hayat. Thank you so much for listening me so much, everyone. So thank you. Thank you, Sumaya. Sa, thank you. So far, so good. Perfect. Donna, thank you. So you guys
Thank
are
you, Mohammed.
lovely. Thank you, Abdullah. Thank you. Thank you. You guys are lovely. Seriously. Yeah, the good thing is that I'm not sure like how much you're getting it, but if you're not getting something, please don't be shy. Ask me. Everyone. It's not for few. Everyone in the class, whoever thinks that okay, I don't get this part, please ask me. Don't be shy. Ask me anything. So benchmark, daily benchmark, we already have done that one. So your new benchmark would be a 4.2 for today's, and you can go through the benchmark. Then we have labs. These labs, are we done with these labs, or like we need to do these labs again? Derek, or just do we have labs today, guys? Let me just
I think yes, we do.
Yes,
You
we
have-
do.
okay, that's
Yeah,
good.
we do.
Yeah, there's a lab
Perfect.
on backups today.
Oh, that means a busy day. So
And
that-
also remember to study for the exams.
yeah, thank you, Franklin, adding this up. Franklin is right. Like, guys, get ready for the belt exam. So we'll miss you tomorrow, Mr. Watts. I will miss you guys, Adnan. Oh, thank you so very much. I will be there in labs. Don't worry. Today, I will not leave you guys so early. I will give you something about OSPF. That's a very tricky topic. I want everyone to be confused. Just a joke. I just want you to get a little bit understanding of OSPF, how it works. So, and RIP as well, and EIGRP as well. So challenge question, guys. What is there? So where do you see yourself in 1 month, 1 year, and in a 5 years? That's a good question. Normally our HR department asks these questions. When is the exam? When is the exam? Maybe next week, Sunday. Oh, Sunday. Yeah, next week Sunday. Yeah, that's the exam. So guys, get ready for it. Exam would not be that much tough. Like that's like yeah, they are the questions are quite straightforward. I have gone through that. Yeah, there are 100 questions. So the questions are straightforward, and very not difficult one. So it won't be a lot of issue for you guys. Like if you are studying every day, like you are studying every day, so it won't be a problem. Like how many of you are working? Anyone working somewhere?
Yes, I am.
You're working. Where are you working? Mullah?
I am working here as a security officer and IT specialist
Ah,
here
okay.
in Australia.
Oh, really great, excellent. So,
Yeah, but
uh,
only weekend. I used to work full time, but now I'm doing weekends only.
oh, nice. So, like, what they are using, what infrastructure they are using?
So it's all about the lecture today. I'm doing.
Hmm.
I do digital forensics. I do reports for them.
Oh,
Um, yeah. So yeah, it's all about the chain of custody, the hashes, the investigations, everything you have explained today.
oh, really? That's nice.
Yeah.
That's time consuming. Like you are the person. Like how much time do you spend over there for forensic?
How much?
Like
Sorry.
to resolve one case. That's a case that we normally say in forensic. Case one, case two,
Yeah.
case three. Like how much time?
It
Like
depends, actually, Muhammad. It depends on the case. So, if the case is from the customer, or if the case just happened 1 week ago, or if it's like I say stolen something, it's just quick. You can do this in 1 hour,
oh,
2 hours. But if
really?
it's a case where an employee have contacted a third party about something malicious, or about doing something behind the
Yes.
company, we call it under the table, so that takes time
Uh,
to prove that actually the employee did this.
Yes, very nice. Guys, listen to Abdullah, like he's correct about it. Like there are different type of cases that we have. If the case is within the inside threat, remember inside threat cases are the toughest one because in inside threat, you are not sure who is the one. So that's the thing. That's very important. And that's one thing that you need to show in the chain of custody. Good. Anyone else apart from Abdullah who is working somewhere, or only Abdullah is working? Perfect. No one else is working, so everyone is student over here. Perfect. Okay, so what was the yesterday question? Derek, challenge question. Can you just put it in the chat window? This question you will answer tomorrow, maybe. Now Lloyd will be there, so you will just answer this question. Like, where do you see yourself in 1 month, 1 year, and 5 years? What do you want to accomplish within those time frame, personally and professionally? So this is a nice, healthy question. Like you, like there is always thanks, Derek. So there is always answer to this question, sir. I will be sitting on your chair. You're asking like one of my friend not does that. So whenever some HR guys ask the question that, okay, tell me after 5 years where you see yourself, sir, I will be sitting on your chair. So that's a motivational thing, but that's like I would prefer that, but still like that's one thing. So you can answer this question tomorrow. And what is more important, your personal ethics or a high paying cybersecurity job? How might someone balance those two often completely value? So yesterday we have gone through this question. Today, like let's finish this up. So again, ethics are important, but again, totally depends upon the understanding, like how much you should like morality is there. But if you are working for any organization for some intelligence or any of the government or for any sake of cause, if it's there, so you can go for a little bit corruption or any dark way you can use. But otherwise, as a personal life, like always be like don't sell your soul to someone. So that's the thing. Anyways, so this was the question, guys. Mostly everyone, if somebody want to answer, add on something, you can just add on in the chat window. No one wants to end nothing. You guys are sleeping now, getting bored.
I think your ethics should go first, because if you don't let this goes first, especially I'm talking when you're working with the private companies. If you don't control your ethics, or if you don't make your ethics as a priority, then you're gonna go to jail for sure. So
100%.
always in cybersecurity, always try to put your ethics in the first thing when it comes to cases, when it comes to decision making.
Yes, totally agree. Thank you, Nora, for putting this. Personal ethics are important. Like, obviously, you should be aware, like, how much you can get involved in something. Like, guys, when you work, that's only things that that's just a theory part. But when you're working somewhere as a as an IT guy or any place, like if you're working for HR as well, if you're working, so there are a lot of things that you will be facing day to day. There are politics. Office politics is very common in every place, and you will find some unethical stuff everywhere in the in office politics. That okay, that was not being done by someone else, but blamed to you. So these things that's a practical knowledge experience, guys. You will be learning in your real world when you enter in your job environments. So like your own, like that's the thing, like over there when this is happening, like if somebody is blaming you that you have not done that, and that over here, that's a very important part in your life, that you do the right judgment and you make sure that you're following the personal ethics, because you cannot become that other person. I'm telling you the real things, guys, that really happen. So that's real politics are there in your office environment. So at that time, be be a command of yourself, use your personal ethics, and try to focus your work. So one thing, like normally we say nowadays, like at least as my own career, I say that always be loyal to your work. So the most important thing is that you should be loyal to your work. You should be loyal to your timing, whatever time that you give to the organization, like 7 hours, 8 hours, loyal to that specific period of time. You should be loyal that, okay, I will do this. You don't need to be loyal to the organization for that. Remember, very important. Our problem with our psychological brain is that you become loyal to something. But no, you need to loyal to your work. Like you work for fun organization, you move to some other. You need to loyal to your work. If you're loyal to your work, that means you can survive any part of the world. So that's like my own personal experience. This is nothing like, that's like what I think. That's like after like 10-15 years working. So I thought that considering your work is like more important, putting your effort in your work is more important, personal ethics are more important, and like that's the more keywords that you will learn. Anyways, guys, that was just apart from this cybersecurity. So no one else have any question? Everyone is good?
Yes, everything is good. Thank you, Mr. Muhammad.